2 weeks after the gold discovery that shook the international community, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, became the epicenter of what many historians would later describe as Africa's most significant political gathering since the formation of the Organization of African Unity in 1963. The African Union's Emergency Summit on Resource Sovereignty had been called at the urgent request of 12 member nations, all of whom had discovered similar patterns of systematic resource theft following Burkina Faso's revelations. The Sadler Conference Hall, normally reserved for routine diplomatic meetings, buzzed with unprecedented energy as delegates from 47 African nations converged to address what was becoming clear was not an isolated incident, but a continental crisis requiring a coordinated response. Captain Ibrahim Traoré's arrival at the summit was contested by several Western-aligned governments who argued that his presence would politicize what should be a technical discussion about mining regulations. However, the majority of African states had insisted that the man who had exposed the systematic theft deserved to present his evidence directly to the continental leadership. As Traoré approached the main podium, the assembly fell. Chapter 3: International Pressure and Hidden Networks. The standoff at the airport hangar stretched through the evening hours as Ambassador Leclerc's confidence began showing cracks under Traoré's methodical questioning. The diplomatic credentials were indeed impeccable, but the documents he presented raised more questions than they answered about the true nature of the gold shipment. Traoré had summoned Major Samira Ouedraogo, his most trusted intelligence officer and one of the few people in his administration with extensive experience in international financial crimes. Her analytical skills, honed during training with French intelligence services, ironically, would prove crucial in dissecting the complex web of documentation that Leclerc had provided. These authorization documents bear the signature of Colonel Paul-Henri Damiba, Major Ouedraogo reported quietly to Traoré, referring to the military leader whom Traoré had ousted in the September 2022 coup. They're dated just 3 days before your takeover of power. The timing was extraordinarily suspicious. Final hour authorizations signed by a leader who knew his government was collapsing, suggesting a last-ditch attempt to extract valuable resources before losing power. And the quantities listed in these official documents, Traoré asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. 75 kilograms total, sir. Significantly less than approximately 300 kilograms we've actually seized, she confirmed, her voice carrying the weight of what this discrepancy implied. The revelation confirmed Traoré's growing suspicion that this wasn't simply a case of smuggling, but evidence of systematic resource theft sanctioned at the highest levels of the previous government. His predecessor had been literally signing away Burkina Faso's mineral wealth until the final moments of his rule, creating legal cover for massive extraction operations. This pattern of last-minute resource deals was familiar throughout Africa. Outgoing leaders granting sweetheart contracts and extraction rights to foreign companies in exchange for personal financial security after losing power. It was a form of insurance policy purchased with national resources. Ambassador Leclerc maintained his diplomatic composure throughout the confrontation, though observant watchers could detect increasing strain around his eyes as his standard diplomatic solutions proved inadequate against Traoré's systematic dismantling of his arguments. "Captain Traoré," the ambassador said with practiced patience, "I understand your concerns about procedural irregularities, but I must emphasize the delicate international nature of this situation. Our countries have maintained productive economic relations for decades, relations that benefit both our peoples." "Benefit for whom?" Ambassador Traoré countered, his voice carrying the weight of years observing resource extraction's true impact on his people. Burkina Faso produces over 50 tons of gold annually, making us one of Africa's largest producers, yet our people remain among the poorest in the world. These statistics don't align with the productive relations you describe. The ambassador's diplomatic mask slipped momentarily, revealing frustration at dealing with an African leader who wouldn't be impressed by vague promises of mutual benefit. Economic development is a complex process, Captain. The investments our companies have made in your country's infrastructure and employment creation represent significant contributions to long-term prosperity. Those investments have primarily benefited your shareholders. Meanwhile, communities surrounding our gold mines lack basic amenities like clean water, electricity, and adequate health care. Our children walk past gold-laden trucks on their way to overcrowded schools with insufficient supplies. As dark fell over Ouagadougou, Traoré retreated to a secure communications room at the airport to coordinate with his broader government team. The implications of the gold seizure were expanding far beyond a simple customs violation. They were dealing with evidence of systematic resource theft that could destabilize international relationships across West Africa. His first call went to his brother and chief advisor, Inosa Traoré, who had been monitoring international news coverage of the airport situation. Ibrahim, international media outlets are already reporting on the detention of a European businessman at Ouagadougou Airport. They're describing it as a diplomatic incident rather than a criminal investigation. This framing was predictable but concerning. By characterizing the seizure as a diplomatic dispute rather than law enforcement action against apparent smuggling, international media was already shaping public perception to favor the accused rather than the investigating government. Contact our allies in Mali and Niger immediately, Traoré instructed. Presidents Goïta and Bazoum need to understand that what we've discovered here likely has implications for their countries as well. These resource extraction networks typically operate across multiple borders. The regional dimension was crucial. West Africa's gold-producing nations had similar geological formations and mining operations, making it highly probable that the systematic underreporting and smuggling they had uncovered in Burkina Faso was being replicated throughout the region. His second critical call went to the Chinese embassy, where Ambassador Liu Wei had been quietly monitoring the situation with great interest. China's growing presence in African resource sectors provided potential alternatives to traditional Western extraction partnerships, but Traoré was determined not to simply exchange one form of dependency for another. While diplomatic maneuvering continued, forensic experts had begun detailed examination of the seized gold bars, recording serial numbers, measuring compositions, and taking samples for origin analysis. Lieutenant Coulibaly approached with preliminary findings that added another layer of complexity to the investigation. "Sir, these aren't standard commercial gold bars," he reported, consulting his tablet display of forensic data. The composition and marking patterns suggest they came directly from local mining operations, likely bypassing official refining and export channels entirely. This discovery was crucial evidence of systematic fraud. By avoiding legitimate processing channels, whoever orchestrated this operation was not only evading taxes and royalties owed to the Burkinabe government, but also concealing the true volume of gold being extracted from the country's mines. "What about the flight plan analysis?" Traoré asked, knowing that aircraft movement data could provide valuable intelligence about the broader smuggling network. "Another significant anomaly, sir. The filed flight plan indicated departure from an airport near Niamey, Niger, but our radar tracking data shows they actually approached from the northwest, possibly from a private airstrip near our border with Mali." The flight path deception suggested sophisticated operational planning designed to obscure the true origins of both the aircraft and its cargo. This wasn't amateur smuggling, but a professional operation with significant resources and international coordination. The web expands. As midnight approached, Traoré received intelligence reports indicating that the gold seizure was having ripple effects far beyond Burkina Faso's borders. Ambassador Leclerc's phone had been ringing constantly throughout the evening, his increasingly tense conversations suggesting powerful interests were mobilizing resources to resolve the situation in their favor. Finance Minister Lassana Traoré arrived at the airport with additional context about the seized gold's potential impact on national economics. Ibrahim, if our preliminary estimates are correct, this single shipment represents approximately 0.5% of our annual gold production. The underreporting implied by the documentation discrepancies suggest we may be losing tens of millions of dollars annually through similar channels. The financial implications were staggering. For a country where the entire annual government budget totaled roughly $3 billion, systematic revenue losses in the tens of millions represented a catastrophic drain on development resources. More disturbing was the realization that the gold seizure might represent merely the tip of a much larger iceberg. If similar smuggling operations were occurring regularly, the cumulative impact on Burkina Faso's economic development could be measured in hundreds of millions of dollars over the years since independence. International media attention. By early morning, international news outlets had begun reporting extensively on what they termed the Ouagadougou incident. However, the coverage revealed stark differences in perspective depending on the outlet's geographical origin and political orientation. Western media generally emphasized the detention of European businessmen and concerns about investment climate, subtly framing the seizure as government overreach rather than legitimate law enforcement action against apparent smuggling. Meanwhile, African media outlets and some progressive international publications focused on the discovery of massive gold smuggling operation and evidence of systematic resource theft, presenting the investigation as long overdue accountability for exploitative extraction practices. Social media amplified both narratives, but African social media users were overwhelmingly supportive of Traoré's actions. Hashtags like #BurkinaGold and #Resource Sovereignty began trending across the continent as the story resonated with populations frustrated by decades of resource extraction that failed to translate into meaningful development. The international attention created both opportunities and risks for Traoré's government. Global awareness could generate support for holding resource extraction accountable, but it also attracted the attention of powerful interests with significant resources for protecting their profitable operations. The ambassador's final gambit. As dawn broke over Ouagadougou, Ambassador Leclerc made one final attempt to resolve the situation through diplomatic pressure. His overnight consultations with his home government, the gold discovery that changed a nation. Captain Ibrahim Traoré's stand. In the heart of West Africa, where the Sahel meets the savannah, lies Burkina Faso, a landlocked nation of 22 million people whose name translates to Land of Upright Men. Beneath its red earth lie some of the continent's richest gold deposits, yet above ground, the reality tells a different story. Persistent poverty, inadequate infrastructure, and a populace that has watched their natural wealth disappear into foreign hands for generations. This is the extraordinary true story of Captain Ibrahim Traoré, a soft-spoken military officer who rose from humble beginnings to become, at 37, the world's youngest head of state. His journey from a village classroom to the presidential palace and ultimately to challenging the very foundations of global resource extraction reads like a modern-day David versus Goliath tale. Except this David had 15 suitcases of gold as his slingshot. Born in 1988 in Bondoku, a small town in western Burkina Faso, Traoré grew up witnessing the stark contradiction that defines much of Africa: immense natural wealth coexisting with grinding poverty. His father, a subsistence farmer, would often point to the mining trucks rumbling past their village, laden with gold-bearing ore destined for foreign processing plants. One day, his father would say, "Perhaps our gold will build schools instead of foreign mansions." Those words would prove prophetic. Traoré's path to power was unconventional. Unlike many African leaders who emerged from political dynasties or business empires, he rose through military ranks, earning respect through competence rather than connections. After graduating from the prestigious military academy in Kadiogo, he served with distinction in counter-terrorism operations across the volatile Sahel region. His fellow soldiers remember him as a leader who shared their rations and slept in the same conditions, a rare quality that would later serve him well in politics. But it was during his deployment with the United Nations peacekeeping mission in Mali, MINUSMA, that Traoré first encountered the full scope of resource exploitation plaguing West Africa. In Mali's gold-rich regions, he witnessed international mining companies operating with minimal local oversight, environmental destruction left unremediated, and communities that remained impoverished despite sitting on top of billion-dollar mineral deposits. The experience was transformative. In quiet conversations around campfires during long desert nights, Traoré and his fellow peacekeepers would discuss the cruel irony. They were risking their lives to maintain stability in regions whose resources were being systematically extracted to benefit others. These discussions planted seeds of an idea that would eventually reshape a nation's destiny. When security forces discovered 15 mysterious suitcases filled with gold bars aboard an unmarked foreign aircraft at Ouagadougou International Airport, it unveiled a web of international corruption that had been systematically draining Africa's wealth for generations. What followed would challenge the global economic order, inspire a continental movement for resource sovereignty, and transform Burkina Faso from a compliant supplier of raw materials into a defiant guardian of its own destiny. This is not just the story of stolen gold recovered, but of a nation's awakening to its own power. It's a tale that begins in the dusty corridors of an airport hangar and extends to the gleaming towers of international finance, revealing how one man's courage to say no can echo across continents and generations. Before we dive into this incredible journey of courage, corruption, and ultimately redemption, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and share your thoughts in the comments below. Where are you watching from, and what do you think about Africa's struggle for resource sovereignty? A day that changed history. The scorching afternoon sun of March 15th blazed mercilessly over Ouagadougou International Airport, its rays creating shimmering mirages on the tarmac as the temperature soared past 40 degrees Celsius. Captain Ibrahim Traoré was in his office at the Ministry of Defense when Lieutenant Coulibaly burst through the door with unusual urgency. "Sir, we have a situation at the airport," Coulibaly announced, his normally composed demeanor cracked with excitement. "An unmarked Gulfstream G650 has just requested emergency landing clearance, no flight plan filed, no prior notification, and specifically requested minimal security presence." Traoré looked up from his papers, his dark eyes narrowing with interest. In his 2 years as head of state, he had learned to trust his instincts honed during years of combat operations in Mali's hostile terrain and counterinsurgency campaigns in Burkina Faso's volatile northern territories. Something about this unscheduled arrival immediately triggered his internal alarm system. "What's their stated reason for landing?" Traoré asked, rising from his desk and reaching for his military cap. "Emergency refueling, sir. Pilot claims they're experiencing fuel system complications and need immediate assistance," Coulibaly replied, consulting his tablet. "But our air traffic controllers note that their approach was perfectly controlled, no signs of distress." As they drove the short distance from the ministry to the airport, Traoré reflected on the broader context that made any unusual aircraft arrival suspicious. Since taking power in September 2022 through a military coup that had broad popular support, he had made resource sovereignty his administration's cornerstone policy. As Africa's fourth-largest gold producer, Burkina Faso extracted approximately 60 tons of gold annually from its soil, yet the vast majority of profits flowed to international mining conglomerates, while local communities remained trapped in cycles of poverty. The statistics were damning. Despite sitting atop mineral wealth worth billions of dollars, Burkina Faso ranked among the world's poorest nations. Life expectancy hovered around 61 years. Infant mortality rates remained tragically high, and more than 40% of the population lived below the poverty line. Meanwhile, foreign mining companies reported profit margins exceeding 300% on their Burkinabé operations. This contradiction had driven Traoré's political awakening. During his military service, he had witnessed firsthand how international interests exploited local resources while contributing minimally to community development. Villages surrounding major mining operations often lacked basic amenities like clean water and electricity, even as trucks laden with gold-bearing ore rumbled past their doors daily. The inspection decision. As their convoy approached the airport perimeter, Traoré could see the sleek aircraft in question, a pristine white Gulfstream with no visible national markings, only a discreet corporate logo he didn't recognize. The plane's estimated value of $70 million raised immediate questions about who could afford such luxury transportation for what was supposedly a routine cargo flight. Have our intelligence services run the aircraft's registration through international databases, Traoré instructed as they parked near the main terminal. And I want a full manifest of passengers and cargo before anyone disembarks. The airport security chief, Colonel Soadago, met them at the entrance with additional concerning information. "Sir, the aircraft's crew has been uncooperative about providing standard documentation. They claim diplomatic status but haven't presented appropriate credentials." Traoré's expression hardened. In his experience, legitimate diplomatic flights followed established protocols meticulously. Claims of diplomatic immunity without proper documentation typically indicated something worth hiding. "Prepare a full inspection team," he ordered. "Include our best customs specialists and forensic equipment. If this is a routine emergency landing, they'll have no objection to standard procedures." As they approached the aircraft's positioning on a remote section of the tarmac, Traoré noticed several crew members peering nervously from the cockpit windows. The plane's positioning itself, far from the main terminal and other aircraft, suggested a desire for minimal observation, another red flag in his mental checklist of suspicious indicators. The confrontation begins. The cabin door opened with a soft hydraulic hiss, and a well-dressed European man in his 50s descended the stairs with practiced confidence. His expensive Italian suit, gold watch, and leather briefcase spoke of significant financial resources, but his confident smile faltered noticeably when he observed the substantial military presence surrounding his aircraft. "Gentlemen," the man began in accented English, quickly switching to French when he recognized the uniforms. "Captain Traoré, what an unexpected pleasure to meet Burkina Faso's distinguished leader personally." Traoré noted the man's immediate recognition and use of his name, suggesting this meeting wasn't as accidental as the emergency landing story implied. "Good afternoon," Traoré replied diplomatically, maintaining a respectful but authoritative tone. "I'm Christophe Mercier, representing Global Resource Investments, a consortium of international partners working throughout West Africa. We're simply making a brief technical stopover en route to our operations in South Africa." Mercier's introduction raised additional questions. Global resource investments was a name Traoré vaguely recognized from intelligence briefings about companies with opaque ownership structures operating in the region's mining sector. Their business model typically involved acquiring extraction rights through arrangements with local officials, then rapidly removing resources with minimal local processing or value addition. "Welcome to Burkina Faso, Mr. Mercier," Traoré responded cordially. "I trust your technical difficulties haven't caused significant inconvenience. May I ask about the nature of your cargo? Standard security protocols require documentation for all materials transiting through our airspace." Mercier's practiced smile tightened almost imperceptibly, a micro-expression Traoré had learned to recognize during military interrogations. "Certainly, Captain. Technical equipment and administrative documents related to our mining operations. Nothing of particular interest, I assure you." The vague description and dismissive tone were classic deflection techniques. Traoré had encountered similar responses from suspected arms dealers and drug traffickers during counter-terrorism operations. Legitimate businessmen typically provided specific, detailed explanations for their cargo contents. "I appreciate your cooperation, Mr. Mercier," Traoré replied smoothly, gesturing toward his security personnel who were already positioning themselves around the aircraft. "Given the unusual circumstances of your arrival, I'm sure you'll understand our need to conduct a standard inspection. It's purely routine and should cause minimal delay." The pressure mounts. Mercier's demeanor shifted noticeably, his commercial charm giving way to barely concealed anxiety. "With all due respect, Captain Traoré, this is a diplomatic flight operating under certain international privileges. Our schedule is quite tight, and we have commitments to maintain in Cape Town this evening." Traoré had heard variations of this response countless times, appeals to diplomatic immunity, international agreements, and urgent schedules that somehow always seemed to emerge when foreign interests wanted to avoid Burkinabe oversight. His years in military intelligence had taught him that such protests typically indicated something worth hiding. "Mr. Mercier," Traoré replied with patient firmness, "I appreciate your scheduling concerns, but in my country, all aircraft are subject to inspection when security considerations arise. An unscheduled landing by an unmarked aircraft with vague cargo descriptions certainly constitutes such a concern." As they spoke, Traoré observed subtle movements inside the aircraft, shadows shifting anxiously behind tinted windows, suggesting additional passengers or crew members who preferred to remain out of sight. This behavior was inconsistent with a routine technical stopover. "Furthermore," Traoré continued, "true diplomatic flights follow established protocols, including advance notification, proper documentation, and coordination with appropriate government agencies. Your arrival lacks these standard characteristics." Mercier's face flushed slightly as he realized his diplomatic immunity claims were being professionally dismantled. His earlier confidence evaporated as he recognized that he was dealing with someone who understood international protocols rather than a local official who might be impressed or intimidated by vague appeals to higher authorities. "This is highly irregular," Mercier protested, his voice rising slightly. "Our company has operated in West Africa for decades with full governmental cooperation. This unprecedented harassment could damage important relationships." The veiled threat was unmistakable. "Comply with our demands or face consequences to your country's international relations." It was precisely the type of economic coercion that had kept African nations compliant with resource extraction schemes for generations. Traoré remained unmoved by the implicit pressure. "Mr. Mercier," Protecting Burkina Faso's interests is my responsibility, regardless of any inconvenience to international schedules. If your cargo documentation is legitimate and complete, this inspection will be brief and professional." Before Mercier could respond with additional protests, Traoré gave a subtle nod to Lieutenant Coulibaly, who immediately moved toward the aircraft's cargo hold with a team of 4 armed soldiers and 2 customs specialists. The die was cast. Whatever secrets lay inside that gleaming aircraft were about to be revealed. Into the cargo hold. The aircraft's cargo hold, accessed through a side compartment that required specialized equipment to open fully, revealed something that would forever change the trajectory of Burkina Faso's relationship with international resource extraction. What security forces discovered defied the routine explanations offered by Mercier and his crew. 15 gleaming metallic suitcases were arranged in precise rows, each one secured with sophisticated digital locks that spoke of high-value contents requiring maximum security. The cases themselves were custom manufactured, not standard luggage, but purpose-built containers designed for transporting something extremely valuable. "Open them," Traoré commanded, his voice steady despite the anticipation building in the hangar where they had moved the suspicious cargo for detailed examination. Lieutenant Coulibaly supervised as technical specialists applied cutting tools to the first suitcase's locking mechanism. The digital lock had been programmed with multiple security layers, suggesting whoever packed these containers expected significant efforts to prevent unauthorized access. The first suitcase creaked open under pressure, and the collective gasp from the assembled soldiers echoed through the hangar's concrete walls. Inside, nestled in custom-fitted foam padding that had been precisely cut to accommodate each piece, lay rows of gold bars gleaming under the fluorescent lighting. Each bar bore serial numbers etched into the metal, but significantly, none carried identifying marks indicating their origin, official processing facility, or legitimate ownership documentation. This absence of standard markings was immediately suspicious to anyone familiar with legal gold trade protocols. "There must be 20 kilograms in this case alone," Lieutenant Coulibaly whispered, carefully lifting one bar and feeling its substantial weight. The gold's purity was evident from its rich color and dense composition. The mathematical reality. As technical specialists systematically opened additional suitcases, the scope of the discovery became increasingly staggering. Each container held similar quantities of gold bars, all bearing the same anonymous serial number format and lacking proper provenance documentation. Traoré maintained outward composure, while his mind raced through the calculations. If each of the 15 suitcases contained approximately 20 kilograms of gold, they were looking at roughly 300 kilograms total, a massive quantity worth millions of dollars on international markets. At current gold prices of approximately $1,900 per troy ounce, 300 kilograms represented a street value exceeding $18 million. For a country like Burkina Faso, with an annual government budget of roughly $3 billion, this single seizure represented a significant fraction of national resources. But the financial value, while enormous, was secondary to the larger implications of the discovery. This gold had clearly been extracted from somewhere, processed to high purity, and was being transported covertly without proper documentation, suggesting systematic circumvention of legal export procedures. "Secure the entire area," Traoré ordered, his military training taking precedence as he recognized the potential international ramifications of their discovery. "Establish a perimeter with armed guards and ensure no one enters or leaves without my direct authorization." The investigation deepens. While his security team implemented containment protocols, Traoré approached Mercier, who sat slumped on a middle folding chair in the hangar's corner. The businessman's earlier confidence had completely evaporated, replaced by barely concealed panic as sweat beaded on his forehead despite the building's air conditioning. "Mr. Mercier," Traoré said calmly, maintaining a professional tone despite the gravity of the situation, "I believe we need to revisit your earlier description of your cargo as equipment and documents of no particular interest." Mercier's eyes darted frantically around the hangar, calculating options that were rapidly diminishing as the full scope of his predicament became clear. "This is obviously a misunderstanding, Captain. Those are properly documented transfers from a legitimate mining operation." "Excellent," Traoré replied smoothly, extending his hand with palm upward in a gesture of patient expectation. "Then you'll have no difficulty providing that documentation for our review." The businessman's hesitation confirmed what Traoré already suspected. There were no legitimate papers for this shipment, or, at best, documentation that wouldn't withstand serious scrutiny. After several moments of uncomfortable silence, Mercier reluctantly reached into his expensive leather jacket and withdrew a slim folder containing what appeared to be official documents. However, even a cursory examination revealed significant problems with the paperwork. Document analysis. Traoré examined the papers carefully, his military intelligence background allowing him to identify several immediate red flags. The letterhead belonged to a mining company he didn't recognize, despite his familiarity with major operations in Burkina Faso. The signatures came from government officials who had been removed during the previous administration's final days. Most critically, the documents authorized transport of mineral assets, but listed quantities that represented only a fraction of what they had actually discovered in the suitcases. "These permits are dated before my government took office," Traoré stated matter-of-factly, holding up the documents for Mercier's examination. "Additionally, they account for only 50 kilograms of gold, not the approximately 300 we found in your possession." The mathematical discrepancy was damning. Official documentation for less than 1/6 of the actual cargo suggested systematic falsification of export quantities, a common method for circumventing tax obligations and royalty payments. "Would you care to explain this significant discrepancy?" Traoré asked, maintaining his calm demeanor while internally preparing for the international complications that would inevitably follow. Mercier's response was predictably evasive. "Perhaps there was a clerical error in the documentation process. I'm merely the transportation coordinator, not the accountant responsible for paperwork accuracy." The attempt to distance himself from responsibility was transparently desperate. Traoré had encountered similar deflection tactics from arms dealers and drug traffickers during counter-terrorism operations. Claims of being uninformed middlemen when faced with evidence of serious crimes. International complications arrive. Before Traoré could press further with his questioning, commotion outside the hangar drew his attention to the arrival of 3 black Mercedes SUVs bearing diplomatic license plates. Through the hangar's windows, he could observe the vehicle's diplomatic flags representing a major European nation with substantial mining interests throughout West Africa. "It appears your associates have been contacted," Traoré observed to Mercier, who was already showing signs of relief at the prospect of diplomatic intervention. "Did you manage to alert them while my team was conducting the cargo inspection?" Mercier straightened slightly, his earlier desperation giving way to renewed confidence as he anticipated rescue by diplomatic allies. "Captain Traoré, I believe these representatives can help clarify what has obviously become an unfortunate misunderstanding between friendly nations." The implication was clear. This wasn't simply commercial smuggling, but involved official government relationships and diplomatic agreements that extended far beyond a single businessman's private activities. From the lead SUV emerged a tall, silver-haired man in an immaculate diplomatic uniform, whom Traoré recognized immediately. Ambassador Pierre Leclerc, a seasoned diplomatic operative who had maintained his influential position in Ouagadougou through multiple regime changes over the past 15 years. The diplomatic gambit. Ambassador Leclerc's reputation preceded him throughout West African diplomatic circles. Known as a master of influence operations, he had successfully protected his country's commercial interests during various political transitions by cultivating relationships across the political spectrum and deploying a combination of financial incentives and subtle threats. Ambassador Leclerc, what we have discovered appears to be the unlicensed transport of Burkina Faso's natural resources. Such serious allegations require thorough investigation according to our national laws. The ambassador's practiced diplomatic smile didn't reach his eyes as he produced a leather portfolio containing what appeared to be high-level authorization documents. Captain, I have here clearances at the highest governmental levels. This gold is being transported as part of a joint security operation between our governments. The operational details are classified for obvious security reasons. The appeal to classified security operations was a sophisticated diplomatic maneuver, an attempt to place the gold shipment beyond questioning by invoking national security considerations that supposedly justified circumventing normal legal procedures. Diplomatic intervention. Ambassador Pierre Leclerc emerged from the lead vehicle, a silver-haired diplomat known for maintaining his position through multiple regime changes in Ouagadougou. Captain Traoré, he called out, striding toward the hangar entrance, his bearing suggesting someone accustomed to having his demands met without question. I must insist you release Mr. Mercier and his cargo immediately. This situation has escalated unnecessarily and could have serious repercussions for our country's relationship. Traoré remained positioned between the ambassador and the gold, symbolically asserting Burkina Faso's sovereignty over the situation. Ambassador Leclerc, what we have discovered appears to be the unlicensed transport of Burkina Faso's natural resources. Such serious allegations require proper investigation according to our national laws. The ambassador's practiced diplomatic smile didn't reach his eyes as he produced a leather portfolio containing what appeared to be high-level authorization documents. I have here authorization at the highest government levels. This gold is being transported as part of a joint security operation between our governments. The operational details are classified for obvious security reasons. The standoff stretched into evening. Intelligence Officer Major Samira Ouedraogo verified the ambassador's documents, discovering they bore the signature of Colonel Damiba, the leader Traoré had ousted, dated just 3 days before the September 2022 takeover. These authorize only 75 kilograms total, far less than what we found, she reported. The revelation confirmed Traoré's suspicions. His predecessor had been systematically signing away the nation's resources until his final moments in power. Productive relationships for whom, Ambassador? Burkina Faso produces over 50 tons of gold annually, yet our people remain among the world's poorest. The decision. As night fell, Traoré retreated to make crucial calls. His brother Inoussa, now his trusted advisor, answered immediately. "The situation is more significant than we thought," Traoré explained. Assemble the cabinet for an emergency meeting and contact our allies in Mali and Niger. We may need their support. Traoré understood the risks. Western powers had long controlled Africa's resources through complex networks of companies, treaties, and compliant officials. Challenging this system meant facing powerful adversaries, but retreat was impossible. The press conference. At noon the following day, Traoré faced assembled international journalists in the presidential palace press room. Yesterday, security forces intercepted an unauthorized shipment of approximately 300 kilograms of gold valued at roughly $16 million, he announced. This gold was being removed without proper documentation, without payment of taxes and royalties, and without the consent of Burkina Faso's legitimate government. He continued with conviction. This represents a pattern of exploitation that has persisted too long, one where Africa's wealth is extracted while its people remain poor. Today, we take a stand, not just for Burkina Faso, but for the principle that a nation's resources belong to its people. Popular support. The public reaction was extraordinary. Spontaneous celebrations erupted in Ouagadougou and other cities as citizens gathered in streets waving flags and chanting support. For the first time since taking power, Traoré felt the full weight of popular backing, but the hardest challenges lay ahead. Expanding investigation. 3 days after the seizure, forensic accountants had traced connections spanning 3 continents. Digital devices from Mercier's team revealed encrypted communications, offshore accounts, and a network including mining executives, international bankers, former officials, and current ministers. Conservative estimates suggest Burkina Faso has lost gold worth billions through similar channels over at least 15 years, Major Ouedraogo reported. For a country with an annual GDP of approximately $19 billion, such losses represented an existential drain on development. International backlash and unexpected support. While the European Union expressed grave concern and the IMF paused loan discussions, something remarkable was happening. Messages of support poured in from across Africa and beyond. In Mali's capital, Bamako, thousands gathered carrying banners with Traoré's image and slogans about African resource sovereignty. Similar demonstrations were reported in Niger, Senegal, and South Africa. Other African nations began launching their own investigations into potential mineral production discrepancies. The smoking gun. Forensic examination of the gold bars revealed hidden identifiers connecting them to a major mining operation that had consistently underreported its actual production. This evidence would compel international courts to take notice, regardless of political pressure. The African Union response. 3 weeks after the discovery, Traoré addressed the African Union Summit in Addis Ababa. His presence had been contested by Western-aligned nations, but most African states insisted on hearing from the man who had become a symbol of resource sovereignty. What began with 15 suitcases has revealed the truth we've avoided confronting. Africa remains rich in resources, yet poor in development because most of our wealth continues flowing outward. His response was electric, a standing ovation reflecting collective recognition of long-felt but rarely articulated truths. The alliance forms. The African Union established an African Union Commission on Resource Sovereignty, with Burkina Faso chairing the initial phase. Leaders from Mali and Niger joined Traoré in forming a regional alliance, coordinating policies on mineral marketing and security cooperation. Together, these three nations controlled vast reserves of gold, uranium, and other critical minerals, creating unprecedented collective leverage. Economic revolution. 6 months after the discovery, Traoré inaugurated Burkina Faso's first gold refinery, constructed through partnerships with Turkish technical experts and African Development Bank financing. "We will no longer export raw gold," explained the Burkina project director, who had returned from Canada to help rebuild his homeland. "We'll produce certified 24-karat bars for direct sale at premium prices." Similar value-added projects were underway across the country: manganese processing facilities, semi-precious stone cutting centers, and feasibility studies for solar panel manufacturing. Grassroots impact. Community leaders from villages surrounding nationalized mines testified to changing realities. "Before, we received occasional donations," explained Elder Sawago. "Now we have formal revenue sharing, youth training programs, and representation on operational oversight committees." Such transformations created constituencies with direct interest in the new resource governance model's success. Persistent threats. Intelligence reports detected increased mercenary activity near Burkina Faso's borders, not immediate invasion forces, but concerning asset positioning that could be activated if diplomatic pressure failed. Yet Traoré had systematically strengthened security forces, established regional defense pacts, and cultivated alternative partnerships. Most importantly, his actions had earned genuine popular support, creating human shields around key facilities. 1 year later, on the first anniversary of the gold discovery, tens of thousands gathered in Ouagadougou's Revolution Square for Resource Sovereignty Day, now a national holiday. The statistics were compelling: mining revenues up 68%, health center construction up 156%, school enrollment grown by 24%. 1 year ago, 15 suitcases revealed that our wealth was being systematically removed without fair compensation, Traoré told the crowd. Today, we celebrate not just that discovery, but what we've built since, a new model placing Burkina Faso's development at its center. Continental impact. The past year had brought remarkable transformations. Nationalized mines operated efficiently under Burkina management. The gold refinery captured additional value before export. Transparent revenue management channeled wealth directly into visible community development. The Sahel Alliance had expanded to include Chad and northern Benin. Other African nations had renegotiated mining contracts using Burkina Faso's frameworks. The African Union established binding continental standards for resource contracts. Looking forward, the 15 suitcases contained gold mined by our people yet being removed without our benefit, Traoré told the next generation of mining students. "Your mission is ensuring that never happens again, that the wealth beneath our feet builds the nation above it." The government established a resource heritage fund, investing mining revenues for future generations to ensure even non-renewable resources would provide permanent benefits. What began as a routine security inspection had catalyzed transformation that would shape Burkina Faso's development for generations. The 15 suitcases of gold, now immortalized in national memory, had revealed not just smuggling mechanisms, but an entire system designed to perpetuate African dependency. More profoundly, they revealed the possibility of a different future, one where resources serve the people to whom they rightfully belong. As Captain Ibrahim Traoré looked out at the celebrating crowds in Revolution Square, he could see that the journey had been dangerous and the challenges immense, but the direction was irreversible. Burkina Faso had reclaimed not just its gold, but its destiny. The young captain's stand at an airport had become a catalyst for continental awakening, proof that with courage, determination, and popular support, even the most entrenched systems of exploitation could be challenged and transformed. The revolution continues, one resource at a time. What are your thoughts on this remarkable story of resource sovereignty? Share your comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring content about African leadership and development.